Good morning and welcome to this Euractiv online event, which is kindly supported by PKEE, the Polish Electricity Industry Association. My name is Frédéric Simon, I'm the Energy and Environment Editor of Euractiv, and I will be your host for today's event, which is titled Energy Poverty, How to Reduce Inequalities. Now, today's event on energy poverty comes in the midst of a global surge in energy prices, a situation which is causing concern especially in the east of the European Union, where the standard of living is generally lower and where energy poverty is a cause of national concern. So where do we stand when it comes to addressing energy poverty in the European Union? And how does the Commission's Fit for 55 package of energy and climate laws can help reduce inequalities? To discuss this topic today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Mrs. Adela Tesarova, Head of Unit for Consumers, Local Initiatives and the Just Transition at the European Commission's DG Energy. Mr. Niels Fuglsang, a Danish MEP who is also a rapporteur on the Energy Efficiency Directive in the European Parliament. He'll be joining us in a few minutes. Baiba Miltovica, she's rapporteur for the Renovation Wave in the European Economic and Social Committee. Dimitri Vergne from BERC, the EU Consumer Organization. Masha Spirnova from Eurocities. And Paweł Siosz, Vice President at the Polish Electricity Company, PGE Group, who will be speaking on behalf of PKEE. Now, welcome to all of you and thanks for joining us today. We'll start this virtual conference with a series of short opening statements from the speakers, and then we'll move on to a Q&A session that will also include questions from the audience. To put a question to the panelists, simply use the right-hand side of your screen, the chat function showing up there, and we will take questions directly from there. I think that's all for me, but before we get to the opening statements from the speakers, let me first give the floor to Mr. Paweł Siosz from PGE, because he has to leave us afterwards. Mr. Siosz, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Energy poverty is a very complex issue because many factors have a great impact on it, such as energy prices, economic situation of citizens, energy efficiency, as well as weather conditions. In case of Poland, long and quiet severe winters, like now, and relatively high share of people with low income who live in buildings with low energy performance cause that this issue is very significant. But rising energy prices are a common problem for the whole European Union, and the level of challenge varies across member states. High energy prices for the final consumer play a big role when it comes to energy poverty. This is why the Fit for 55 package should not only enable the achievement of new European climate targets, but also mitigate the negative effect that proposed changes will have on the consumers' bills. In the case of the Czech Republic and Slovakia, energy expenditure already exceeds 20% of the household budgets. And in the case of Romania, Hungary and Bulgaria, it is around 15%. The solutions adopted must not drive energy consumers into poverty. If a transformation of electricity and heating sectors is not designed in the most cost-efficient way, and appropriate amount of EU funds is not ensured, energy companies have to increase energy prices to secure funds for new investments. Nevertheless, the price increases must take into account the social impacts and should be introduced gradually. This is why a reasonable pace towards climate neutrality which reflects national conditions, is of a crucial importance, especially now when electricity and gas prices in the EU are very high. Additional burdens cannot be imposed in an unbalanced manner. At the end of the day, the costs are borne by consumers. The social acceptance for a transition and respect for the rule "no one is left behind" is now crucial as never before. Therefore, the Polish Electricity Association's members are concerned about some proposals from the Fit for 55 package, which in our opinion do not reflect properly different starting points of member states toward climate neutrality. I will mention two examples. Firstly, the EU ETS directive, which does not resolve the pertaining issue of imbalances in some member states which do not receive that are equivalent to the cost borne by the EU ETS covered installations. This imbalance translates into 40 billion euro that the Polish companies would transfer abroad as a result of the imbalance, and hence finance the energy transition of other countries. The European Commission further deepens this issue through the proposals aiming at the cap tightening, such as through the proposed changes within the MSR framework. Also, we argue that the issue of the role the financial institutions play of the EU ETS markets, leading to the speculation and, in consequences, further unpredictable surge in the EU ETS price, has not been properly acknowledged by the Commission. Secondly, district heating. New, very strict rules for efficient district heating systems proposed without reasonable period to adjust investment plans, as well as the exclusion of natural gas-fired high-efficiency cogeneration plants from the scope of the modernization fund, might, in practice, impede transformation of heating sector in countries like Poland. Natural gas-based cogeneration in district heating systems is the only viable and available solution due to specific weather conditions, as well as the high capacities and temperature parameters required in dense urban areas, which rules out the wider use of the heat pumps. The use of renewables and large-scale district heating system is limited, especially taking into account that biomass supply will be further limited due to the biomass sustainability criteria. An increase in the burden, including taxation, on natural gas should be avoided, as the impacts on the shift to low carbon fuels. The European Green Deal is a huge and ambitious program, which will, without a doubt, bring many benefits, but also cause additional costs. The impact assessment underpinning the 2030 climate target plan found that an increase of the 2030 emission target to minus 55% raises the energy-related household expenditure. As the answer, the Commission has proposed the creation of the Social Climate Fund. This is a step in the right direction. However, a size of the fund might not be enough to resolve the issue of energy poverty and properly respond to the social challenges related to the proposed extension of the EU ETS to buildings and transport sectors. To alleviate social impacts of energy price increase, governments introduce various mechanisms dedicated mostly to sensitive to defense laws households. However, we need European solutions as well. I believe that the special report prepared by the Euroactive and today's event will be an important contribution to discussion about finding a good solution which will enable mitigation of energy poverty and ensure that transition is really just and inclusive. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Siosz, for giving us this opening statement, and we wish you a pleasant rest of the day. Now, let me turn to our next speaker for the opening statements, and that is Mrs. Adela Tesarova from the European Commission.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I would suggest that I think that the first should be the Parliament to start here. I don't think I have the priority in the order of the speakers. Thank you.
Sorry, Mrs. Tesarova.
Okay, the Commission never speaks before the Parliament, and we have the ECOSOC here as well. So I thought I'm the bureaucratic representative here. I mean, happy to speak, of course, but I don't think this is the right order of. So yeah, I can say that, of course, for the Commission, the energy poverty is an important topic. In the current high price environment, this of course became even more topical, and the Commission, with its toolbox, made it very clear that any impact on vulnerable and energy poor households in the current context, but also in general, addressing energy poverty, is of course something that has to be addressed at all levels, member states level, EU level, and local level. From the Commission side, we have included a lot of energy poverty support, like let's say a lot of measures which are supporting eradication of energy poverty in the Fit for 55 package. Some of them were mentioned by Mr. Cioch, in particular the Social Climate Fund, but also the Energy Efficiency Directive contains priority measures to push for energy savings among vulnerable energy poor households and households living in social housing. So that's a big priority in the Energy Efficiency Directive. And of course, the rest of the package, making available renewable energies to households, or let's say pushing for people activation and let's say emancipation of consumers away from fossil fuels. All this is contributing to addressing energy poverty at its core, because of course energy poverty is a pre-existing problem. We want to avoid that decarbonization makes this problem worse. That's why the Fit for 55 package has all these social measures included, especially the Social Climate Fund. But in principles, energy poverty is a pre-existing problem. It is linked to inability of people to pay fossil fuel bills. And of course, moving away from fossil fuels is a way how to eradicate energy poverty. Helping people insulate their houses so that they don't have big energy bills, and helping people install renewables, helping communities install renewables is the way forward. Because if people are not dependent on fossil fuels, we will not have energy poverty. So thank you very much. That will be just a short introduction from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Tesarova, and apologies for earlier. I didn't quite got your first remark. Turning now to Niels Fuglsang from European Parliament.
All right, thank you very much, Frederic, and thank you to the European Commission and PKEE for their interventions. I think obviously energy poverty is an extremely important topic. We need to do a green transformation, but we need to do it in a socially just way. And I believe, also as a social democrat, that if you don't do it in a socially just way, you will have no green transition at all. I mean, I think we've seen examples of that in different places of Europe, France most prominently, where you had the yellow vests protesting against climate policies because the climate policies had a socially unjust profile and had the consequence that some people could not afford energy. They could not afford energy for their cars, and they had difficulties to basically have a budget that could hold and could function, and so that put them in a very, very unfortunate situation. So I think if we are to do the green transition, and we are, that's a must. We need to do it in a socially just way. How do we do that then? Well, I think that I agree with the European Commission here that we need to go, of course, away from fossil fuels. I think we've seen with the energy crisis, with spiking energy prices, I don't know if we want to call it a crisis or not, but it is certainly a crisis for some people. We have 34 million households in Europe who have difficulties paying their energy bills. And in this situation, I think what we need to do is really to become energy independent. Make sure that we're not dependent on importing fossil fuels, gas, oil from other parts of the world. The spike in energy prices is to a very large degree caused by a spike in gas prices. We import this gas from Russia and other places. If we can manage to actually become energy independent by increasing our own renewable energy, by expanding our offshore wind energy, for example, and at the same time becoming more energy efficient, so we basically use less energy by insulating our buildings better, by using our waste heat from data centers, for example, in a better way. Then we can actually save money. We can reduce the energy bills, and at the same time, obviously, spark the green transition, or really boost the green transition. And that's what we need. I think it's great that we have a climate law. It says at least 55% reductions of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 compared to 1990. That's a step in the right direction. However, we also know, if you read the UN climate panel's climate reports, 55% is not enough, actually. We need to do more than that. So I'm paying attention to that we've written at least 55%. And I think the legislation on the Energy Efficiency Directive and on the Renewable Energy Directive and all the other Fit for 55 files, they should reflect that we really need, this is the time. We cannot postpone action any longer. If we, as politicians, this time, the politicians who have the mandate this time, and the commissioners who have the mandate this time, if they, after their mandate says, all right, so we didn't get to do what we needed to do, like in the past, we're going to have to postpone things because it has just been too difficult. Then the Paris Agreement, then the 1.5 degrees target to limit global warming to the maximum 1.5 degrees, then that's not going to happen. So we have a huge responsibility right now. And I agree here with the Commission that we need to go away from fossil fuels, and we need to increase energy efficiency. And that's why I think it's right. It's right that the European Commission is proposing to raise the price on carbon in the ETS, and is proposing in the Energy Efficiency Directive to basically say energy efficient heating systems and energy efficient solutions should not include fossil fuels. I think it is not a good favor to vulnerable people to have a policy where you basically make them dependent on fossil fuels for any longer than they need to. we have a lot of the solutions on renewable energy, and that's the solutions that we need to use to both solve the climate crisis and the energy crisis. That will be my opening statement. I'm looking very much forward to the debate with you.
Thanks, Mr. Folsang. And let me turn now to Baiba Miltovica from the European Economic and Social Committee.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me well, and I can continue. I would like to thanks my, cooperation partners from the Commission and also the Parliament, Adela Tesarova and Nils Folksang. And you really mentioned something that are reflecting the work that we do here in the Economic and Social Committee. I can agree that we need to have a green transition, and why? Because if you look at international perspective, from International Energy Agency data, in the Europe's energy mix consists of 80% of fossil fuel and 20% of renewable energy. And if we want to move in the energy, in the European Green Deal, of course, we need to boost, we need to work more to exit from the fossil fuels. But in the other side, there is society. I come from a civil society perspective, from the consumer organizations. I belong to consumer movement, which is BIUC, European Consumer Organization Networks. And we work a lot, even before the energy prices increased. We worked for many years on the energy poverty, and especially there are instruments like Horizon 2020, and we work on the solutions to tackle energy poverty. We coordinate actions in different member states, and we see what is happening on the ground. And let me be very honest, from the civil society organization's perspective, I can agree that if you ask about how to reduce inequalities, we are talking about building stock. It's true. But we need to understand that society or citizens already faced with energy poverty before the energy price crisis. But now they're suffering even more because average consumers are already looking at this disbalanced situation in between the income and the growing, and still growing, because it's not end of the story, disbalanced situation. And situation is getting, as I mentioned, more and more scarce. And therefore, we need to find solutions, and buildings are one of the solutions that we can do, really. But what we need for promoting these initiatives, like, for example, Renovation Day for Europe, we really need all the financial instruments working in collaboration. Let me just mention that energy poverty is not at EU level. It's not even at member states level. It is at local level, at municipalities, villages, bigger or smaller cities and towns, and only at local level you see the real problems. I would like to mention instruments that are available for municipalities and at local level. And we talk about national energy and climate plans. We talk about recovery and resilience plans. And actually they need to work together with Social Climate Fund and many other instruments that member states also have. But sometimes if you read these documents from the consumer organization perspective, you don't see these linkages and you don't see the focus. And we don't have much time now, actually, because we need to do our homework with the energy stock in the European Union. I would like to mention that I represent a section that is dedicated to transport, energy, infrastructure, and information society. We are 107 members in this section, working on various opinions referrals from the Commission and also Council. And Renovation Wave for Europe was one of the flagship initiatives in this year. And I need to mention my colleagues because I'm not working alone. As I mentioned, 107 representatives. I need to mention a colleague from France, Pierre-Jean Coulon, working with me. I need to mention also a colleague from Romania, Laurentio Plosciano, working with me, and many others. And they were particularly dedicated attention to Renovation Wave for Europe. Of course, we are continuing, and there are many new initiatives that are related to the current situation. For example, opinion on energy prices. As we heard from the Commission, from the Parliament now, also a renewable energy directive, and many others that need to have this linkage and to focus on the local level citizen, that we need to find the ways how to better serve local citizens, because obviously the system that we created so far with renovation of the buildings and residential buildings, I mean, it doesn't work, because if you see the renovation rates in every member state, they are less than 7 or 5%. So it's very slow. It's a very long-lasting process. So we need to boost all these instruments so that citizens at local level and also municipalities can help citizens to renovate their residential buildings. And this would be my main package, my main message. And I would like to say also that Fit for 55 package have many instruments that we can use in order to boost this assistance and boost this help. Thank you very much, and I give floor to the next speaker, and I'm really pleased to be here in Euractiv event.
Thanks, Baiba Miltovica. And so let me turn to Dimitri Vergne now from BEOC, the EU Consumer Organization.
Thank you very much, Frederic, and thanks for having us on this panel. Well, Baiba said it very clearly. As consumer groups, we focus a lot on energy poverty. It has been a priority for us way before the energy prices surge, which makes the issue much more problematic, as was clearly said by previous speakers. The point I'd like to make maybe in this introductory remarks is about the way we approach the problem. Too often, and that's an important discussion to have, because this will be an important discussion between the European Parliament and the Council, notably in the context of the discussion on the Energy Efficiency Directive. Too often, the problem, the issue of energy poverty, is approached as a social policy issue. And our point as consumer groups, or our approach, and Baiba said it already, is that the issue of energy poverty is first and foremost an infrastructural, systemic problem or issue of our energy system, which has negative social consequences. And this point is important to make, and it's more than mere semantics, because depending on the way you look at it, from the social lens or from this energy system infrastructural lens, this will define, of course, the solution and the measures that you will take to tackle the issue. And by the problem with an approach which is concentrating first on the social policy, is that probably you will never really tackle the root causes of energy poverty. For instance, you will, through social policy, lump sum payments, mitigate the most negative impacts for energy poor consumers, but without really giving them a long-term perspective and solving the problem at its roots. And so I think that's the whole discussion we're having at the moment, and that we need to have. We need to work, especially in relation to the Fit for 55 package, on the root causes of energy poverty. And there, I'd say, to pick up on what Pavel said at the beginning, I'd say we don't think that the Fit for 55 package is a risk to increase energy poverty. What we think is rather the opposite. The Fit for 55 package is the best opportunity we have to tackle the causes of energy poverty. So we need to accelerate the renovation wave. We need to look at to move away from fossil fuels, which are more expensive than electricity, for instance, to heat our homes. We also need to look at every possible measure under the Energy Efficiency Directive, which targets especially energy poor people. And that's the best way we'll have to tackle energy poverty. I'll stop here, but I hope we'll have the occasion to enter a bit more in details on the different measures we need to have.
For sure, Dimitri, we will come back to that, of course, during the Q&A session that will follow. Now, to close the round of opening statements, let me turn to Masha Smirnova from Eurocities.
Yes, thank you very much, Frédéric. It's an honor to be here with you today. I would like to bring also the view from the perspective of cities and local authorities in respect to tackling energy poverty, maybe also with some practical examples. So what many speakers already have said, that energy poverty is a multidimensional phenomenon and it cannot be tackled in isolation. This is a very fundamental issue at local level and in cities where 2/3 of EU population lives, but also where most greenhouse gas emissions are produced. And that means that decarbonization strategies need to address energy, transport, buildings, while also taking citizens on board and ensuring social equity. So yes, it is not as just merely a social policy, as also Dmitry said, but it also needs to translate very policies across those different sectors. So depending on the competences that local governments have in this domain, cities actually very often look to combine social and energy policies. For instance, by supporting energy retrofit schemes, setting up one-stop shops for energy efficiency solutions, providing renovation support for vulnerable households. Some cities even go further. We have just conducted a survey of climate adaptation measures and support measures in the context of the upward revision of the 2030 targets. And we interviewed 55 cities, and about a fifth of them also provide direct debt relief from energy bills to vulnerable groups. So against the background of the recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive that recognizes very much the key role of public authorities and the upcoming revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, it is clear that the energy transition represents a key opportunity to improve access to better quality housing if, and this is a big if, renovation costs are balanced as much as possible with energy savings. And security of tenure is also ensured. So local governments cannot do it by themselves. Of course, multi-level collaboration between EU, national, regional, and local levels, something also that our colleagues from the Commission mentioned, is very important here. So even if energy as such is not generally a competence of local authorities, in recent years, we can attest that their role has been growing. So we see also a democratization of energy, district heating networks, energy communities, which are all driven in part by local level. And those measures can contribute simultaneously to key social and environmental objectives by increasing democratic decision-making. So it is not about actually compensating people, but it's also bringing something more empowering by really including the communities in the transition. Incentivize energy access to people at risk of social inclusion, contribute to energy sovereignty and decarbonization objectives, as we talk, of course, about renewable energy coming mostly from solar and wind. So against the background of the energy price hike, and it was already said before that it is our dependency on fossil fuel imports that got us here in the first place, there is really merit to have such projects rolled out at much bigger scale. For example, the city of Amsterdam has really doubled their solar panels each year. So between 2012 and 2019, it grew by 54%. The city of Prague supports 20,000 solar panels installations in residential buildings as part of the new climate plan. And we were also very pleased to see that the Greek government has earmarked 100 million from the Recovery and Resilience Facility to support those energy communities together with the municipalities in Greece. So in conclusion, I just would like to go back to the title of this debate, namely how to reduce inequalities. And taking the multidimensional character of poverty and inequality, we really know, and this is very visible from the COVID situation, that a shock in one dimension, such as we have seen with health, has exacerbated all other forms of inequalities, including economic, social, gender inequalities within countries. It is also very concerning that the gap between the top of the wealth distribution and the rest of the population has widened dramatically during the pandemic. I really recommend to read the World Inequality Report that was authored with Thomas Piketty, which was released today, that also documents 31% of total drop in global income that was recorded in Europe. So next to the importance of the fiscal and redistributive policies, we think that the essential role of public services need to be strengthened to tackle inequalities, especially since we know that many of the social and environmental inequalities are intertwined. So in that respect, it is really key to recognize access to affordable and clean energy as a social right, which actually is the first target of SDG 7 and is reflected in the European Pillar of Social Rights, Principle 20 on access to essential services. And with the ongoing deliberation on the future of the European fiscal rules, we really need to refocus on public investments for such services that bring together welfare provision with clean infrastructure and really consider them as an investment rather than as a cost that can be excluded from the debt criteria to really create the necessary leeway that we need for sustainable transition that is inclusive for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Smirnova, and so we can move on to the panel discussion. But I see that Pavel Siosz is in fact still with us. He hasn't left, contrary to what I announced at the beginning. And Pavel, I believe you have some final remark to make.
Yes, because I have to leave our debate in 2 minutes, but I would like to add one reflection. The biggest reason of increasing prices for electricity for householders and consumers is the situation on EU ETS market. Because when we had discussion 1 year ago, the prices for allowances for CO2 emission were on the level 25, 27 euros. Analysis showed that more than 50, 55 euros per ton will be reached on 2030. Now, after 1 year, we have prices more than 80 euro per ton. And from our point of view, for us, for Polish energy sector, is the biggest problem. Because we spend our internal money from our budgets for CO2 permits, not for new big investments in RES. Of course, we have many programs like PV, onshore and offshore on Baltic Sea, but it's kind of vicious cycle or closed circle. Therefore, in my opinion, I think we should wonder about refreshing EU ETS system, new regulation and dedication for not for all, because we observe the speculation on this market. So it's my small reflection on that, and I think it's the biggest problem at the end, of course, for consumers and households. Thank you for debate. I wish you fruitful discussion.
Thanks very much, Pavel Siosz, and we wish you a very pleasant rest of the day. Going back to the panel discussion, as Mr. Siosz was making his comments, Dimitri Verne, we saw you shaking your head So maybe you would want to make a reflection about how the ETS revision may help when it comes to addressing energy poverty. Mr. Schoss seems to believe there are opportunities there to do something.
Thanks, Frédéric. Well, I shook my head respectfully, right? Respectfully disagreeing with what Mr. Schoss was saying, because I think it has been looked into, and the impact of ETS on the prices increases is of course non-negligible, but it's certainly not the main cause behind the price surges. The price surges is mostly caused by the high demand worldwide for gas, and the worldwide price increase of gas. So my point would be, let's not focus on the wrong targets. ETS for me is not the main cause. What we should look at instead, if we want to find the right cure to this energy prices and energy poverty issue, is really to move away from fossil fuels again, as Mr. Fuglsang made his point at the beginning, and increase the renovation rate of buildings. Regarding the ETS reform, well, on the already existing ETS, it's not a topic we're focusing on as consumer groups. We have been a bit worried about the proposed extension of ETS to road transport and buildings. We were a bit skeptical about this, but now the proposal is there, and so we should probably work on all the accompanying measures, such as the social climate fund, to make sure that really all the revenues go back to consumers and help them, escaping energy poverty. And I'd say as a complement, it's not only about ETS revenues or the social climate fund, it's also about all the sector-specific legislation that can help achieving this objective. And for instance, in the Energy Efficiency Directive, we need really, and the Commission proposed that, mandatory measures so that a minimum share of energy saving obligations or energy efficiency obligation schemes will be targeted to energy poors, because that's the best way to help people move away from this difficult situation.
Thanks, Dimitri Verne. Let me turn maybe on the same subject then to Mr. Niels Fuglsang, since you're a rapporteur on the Energy Efficiency Directive. What Dimitri Verne just spoke about there, the suggestion that he's making to focus more of the attention on vulnerable households and consumers when it comes to efforts made under the Energy Efficiency Directive. Do you agree this is something that needs to be prioritized? And maybe also a word about the ETS. I mean, obviously the existing ETS, the impact of speculation there is relatively small, but there is widespread concern about the extension or the creation of a new ETS for buildings and transport. Maybe you can say a few words on this, whether you share those concerns or not.
Yes, thank you. Well, I agree with Dimitri that we certainly need to make sure in the Energy Efficiency Directive that a significant share or a significant part of the effort is directed at the vulnerable people, those who are energy poor, because these are the people who need, I mean, to increase the energy efficiency in the houses where they live, for example. These are the people who need it the most because, well, they don't have so much money. So if they can save something on the energy bill, if we can direct the effort to make better insulation, for example, at their homes, it will have a lot of benefits for them. And at the same time, these are the people, even though these are the people who need energy efficiency probably the most to pay the energy bill, at the same time, these are the people who live often in buildings that are not well insulated. that are old and that where the heat leaves very fast. I remember myself living in London after high school with some friends. We didn't have so much money, so we rented a cheap flat in South London, where it was impossible to keep it warm during the winter, and the window was broken, so the heat just left very fast. Now I survived, and I was a young man, so I could probably deal with that. But if you have to live like that for many years, that's not a good situation, obviously. So I agree with that point of view. When it comes to the ETS, well, I think again, the discussion you just had, I think that from the analysis that I've seen, the rising ETS price is not the main cause of the rising energy prices. It is the gas. It is the surging gas prices, basically. So I think it would be wrong to blame the ETS. I think we have gotten, of course, a higher ETS price. Right now, I think it's 60 euro per ton CO2, and that is actually not. I mean, that's not a bad thing. I mean, we want the ETS price to rise, because the ETS price will give an incentive to expand renewable energy. It will make renewable energy more competitive compared to fossil fuels. And so when you have an increased ETS price, the states, they also have more revenue because they sell ETS allowances, so they collect more revenue, and they can use that revenue to compensate vulnerable people. I think that would be a good way to use that revenue, since they have more of it right now. I think when it comes to the ETS expansion that you referred to, expanding the ETS to housing and to transport, I think in general it's a good idea. Where we need to increase the effort, especially on transport. That is an area where we're not in control. We haven't reduced greenhouse gas emissions like we need to. So we need to really prioritize these areas. But I think at the same time, it is incredibly important that we then use the ETS revenue, and that is also a proposal from the Commission, that a fourth of the revenue from the new ETS should go into the social climate fund, which should be used to compensate vulnerable consumers. So in general, my main point is that it's okay that the ETS price rises. That's actually on purpose. That's the idea of the ETS system. But at the same time, we need to compensate those who are vulnerable via the ETS revenue, but also the states. They have a massive responsibility in designing that taxation system in a progressive way, so that the vulnerable don't pay the lion's share of the burden here. You need to, as far as I'm concerned, you need to make sure that top income groups are taxed in a responsible way, so that they contribute more than the vulnerable people. Then you can cut taxes for the vulnerable people, and that's the way we can use the tax system to redistribute some of the economic resources. Thank you.
Thanks, Niels Volsang. Let me throw another area of discussion here. It's about energy poverty and the definition of energy poverty, because currently there is no common definition of energy poverty. Each member state has its own at the moment, and that is something that prevents meaningful action to be taken at the EU level. Dimitri Verne, you said it's an issue that Berg has been working on for many years. Can you maybe tell us whether this issue of having a common definition of energy poverty, would that help in your view?
Well, yeah, I guess, this boils down to the point I was making in my introductory remarks, that depending on the approach you take, that drives a bit the policy measures that you will have. So if you consider energy poverty as first and foremost a social issue, you might not tackle the root causes. So, but at the same time, I think we don't need to spend too much time focusing on, this definition, which is a difficult debate. The European Commission in the EED proposal has made quite a good definition proposal linking the level of income and the inability to keep your home warm, but also to fulfill basic needs such as cooking, for instance. I think this is a bit of the combination of both, which needs to be taken to understand both the social aspect and the infrastructural energy one. So that's how I would put it. Our members have been working on this as well in the framework of this of the project Baiba was referring to on energy poverty, this Horizon 2020 project. So maybe she will be able to complement, because it's also very much as other speakers said, a very local issue. So you need to ensure a bit of flexibility as well to cater in this local dimension.
Thanks, Dimitri. So let me turn therefore to Baiba Miltovic. Maybe you can share a few more of your thoughts about the need or not for a common definition of energy poverty, and whether that reflects the disparities among the member states.
Yes, thank you. I think the question is really relevant, and it is topical for many years, I would say. It's not the first year we're talking about that. And we really need not only common definition, but we need coordinated actions at EU level, not only in the remits of consumer movement organizations, but we need coordinated actions at EU institutional level. And apart from that, we need common energy poverty definition. We need to see that in national energy and climate plans, energy poverty is recognized, because in many cases we made analysis, you can't see really proper addressing to the problem. So we need to look at all these comprehensive documents that they need to reflect reality that is existing. And there is another thing that Dimitri mentioned about being placed the energy poverty in the social policy. And we need to understand that at the member states level, social policy is treated separately. There are separate ministries, separate infrastructure, institutional setting that is dealing with this issue. But energy poverty is more than the social issue. It is also energy issue. It's also economical issue. It is also labor. It's broader social dimension, because person can be energy vulnerable for limited time. It doesn't mean that it will be lasting for all his or her life. It can be for limited time while there is an unemployment situation, for example. So we need to see at this issue at holistic approach, not in a silo, dealing it only in the social policy remit. And another thing that is very important, that coordinating actions really can help to raise society's awareness and understanding what is happening right now if we talk about climate changes and also need for green transition, because I would say that we are lacking of this society's awareness. And there is big gap in between perception and reality. Perception of Green Deal, perception of, I must say sometimes we are living in this European bubble, but from the other side is this reality that means, and this perception and reality remains really wide. And in reality, I would like to come back again to the statistical data that only 20% of renewable energy is constituting in the energy mix. So there are many tasks that we need to do, but the first one is coordinated action that integrates this common energy poverty definition, that is not existing at today.
Thanks a lot. Maybe let me turn now to Masha Smirnova for your thoughts on this debate about whether energy poverty needs a definition actually at the EU level or not. Do you think this is something that would help, and how do you think it should be approached?
Yes, I think it would help, but it's good if the definition remains broad. Because it also needs to be refined by member states, by local governments according to their own national circumstances. And that also needs to take into account local realities, especially also the fact that we have very recurrent heat waves in Southern Europe, and that cooling poverty, for example, is an issue in some countries more than the others. So the way to approach it would really be to take the social indicators, the socioeconomic indicators, but also combine those with housing energy performance and energy consumption. Some countries have a type of household vulnerability index, Portugal, for example, that really reflects the multiple dimensions. And I think that should also stay a leeway to refine the broad indicators that we need at European level. And I also want to say that maybe as a transition from the discussion on ETS, that actually strengthening the energy poverty, that's where the approach is actually very patchy in the national climate and energy plans through the European Social Fund is really also something that is an enabling factor to strengthen the social dimension and stronger cooperation with the local level in tackling the issue.
Thanks very much. Let me turn now to Mrs. Tesarova for your reflections about the need for a common definition of energy poverty. It's something that the Commission has refrained from doing until, I believe, recently. So is it possible, in your view, to have a definition of energy poverty at the European level that also takes into account the diverging situations of the member states?
Okay, thank you very much. So from the Commission side, I can confirm that the Commission indeed proposed the definition of energy poverty in the review of the Energy Efficiency Directive. And it is a very broad definition because indeed it's not possible to be exhaustive. And so the definition is on the table and hopefully should help, but it's certainly not the objective to capture all the specificities, and we will never be able to do that. For example, we use 13 indicators to define energy poverty, and different countries stand differently in each of these indicators. So we cannot define energy poverty in one way because it's a complex thing, and so that's why the Commission proposed a very generic definition, which should be acceptable for everyone without trying to tell member states what exactly energy poverty must be. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Adela Tesarova. Let me pick up now on a few questions coming from the audience. And the one that has got the most votes, because we have an internal voting system, is a question about the prices that electricity companies charge their consumers. So we have here one of our viewers who is from Romania. And he says regulators should force energy companies to align their selling prices to the cost of production. And so he cites an example in Romania of a company called Hydroelectrica, which charges a price which is 10 times higher their production cost. Is that something, in your view, that needs to be addressed by regulators? And maybe we can turn to the consumer groups first. Bajba Miltovica, maybe you would want to say a few words about this?
Of course, we need to react, and we cannot stay silent. And I think there is also energy regulators' role that is, for example, responsible for looking at capital reinvestment shares, and there's also role of consumer movement as watchdogs to look at the situation and share this bad practice, I would say, and to find coordinated actions, because if this practice is today in one country, most probably it will be visible in other countries in next days. So there should be coordinated action, there should be coordinated response, there should be role of national energy regulators, and also I would say the CER, which is European Energy Regulators Council, that can really come up with more recommendations how to deal with this situation. But of course, coordinated action is the key issue, I would say.
Thank you. Dimitri Verne, maybe a few thoughts on your end when it comes to how much electricity companies can charge their consumers related to their cost. Is that something you believe regulators should intervene on?
Well, I would very much echo what Bajba just said. In this sensitive period with price surges, it's extremely important that regulators keep close look at the market and sanction abuses. We've seen in some countries, I don't know about this Romanian example, but we've seen in some countries some electricity providers taking advantage of the price surge to increase their prices at an acceptable level, and this is something that our network of consumer organizations has been closely looked at, and we've also spoken to the European Commission ahead of this the presentation of this toolbox of last October to mitigate energy prices increase. And I think that was also a strong line in the Commission's communication. Be careful about potential abuses on the market. And beyond this, I'd say, there is also all the series of short-term measures we need in this period to make sure that consumers are not harmed too much by this prices increases. And here I would mention, and that's particularly relevant, of course, for energy poor people, ban on disconnections, or reduction of taxation. These are things which really need to be implemented at national level to make sure that you mitigate as much as possible the short-term impact for consumers of this energy prices surge.
Thanks, Dimitri Verne. Another question from the audience, which maybe I could direct at Masha Smirnova from Eurocities. It's a question from Mike Parr. He's an energy consultant. And he says a solution to rural energy poverty is community energy schemes, something that was introduced in the last clean energy package. He says the development of these energy community schemes are constrained by regulatory and market measures, plus rules which are implemented by network operators. And so he's suggesting that Fit for 55 package should somehow try to address this. Masha Smirnova, do you believe there is indeed an issue? Do you perceive here as well that there are still regulatory barriers standing in the way of the creation of these energy communities?
Yes, of course they are, and this is, I think, is equally an issue at urban level. I mean, we have energy poverty is a phenomenon across all territories. So it is very important also to work on reducing those barriers, but again, cities don't always have competence in doing that. This is why the multi-level governance approach is so important. What is also often inhibiting factor is that measures cannot be sufficiently rolled out at scale, and this is what I said we have to look at more closely, because for example, there is a very good examples with the solar energy, but this is a relatively easy technically, but when it comes to other solutions, there is much more barriers, and there's also lack of access to finance that cities are not having in the regard to really accelerate the needed transition. So it is very important that also this long-term investments are encouraged, and this is why also the upcoming revision of the EU fiscal rules is important in that respect.
Thanks, Masha Smirnova. Let me stay with you for another question coming from the audience, coming from Guido Dernbauer. I guess this is something that applies mostly to cities. He says mostly tenants are affected by energy poverty, but they have no influence on their type of heating systems. And he's asking, what strategies are there to take the homeowners into their obligation to change heating system? Actually, it's not an obligation at the moment. But Masha Smirnova, do you have a reflection about this?
Yes, I mean, this is a classical issue of split incentives that is especially affecting cities where we already have affordability crisis. Where actually most of the building stock is mixed ownership, and this creates, of course, barriers in accelerating energy efficiency measures. I think we need stronger regulatory measures also coming from the EU level in the upcoming regulations. It's the same issue elsewhere also, because if we don't have strong regulations, strong national obligations also that can be followed through, some of the measures that cities are doing would be in vain. I mean, this is for instance, the case with the CO2 standards. I mean, doing low emission zones without having more stringent standards would not be as effective. So we need more stringent regulation, minimum energy performance standards for homeowners, and it is very important that the renovation wave is also considers the vulnerable groups, that there are no hikes in rental prices that could potentially lead to evictions or renovictions, as some would call it.
Thanks. Let me turn maybe to Mrs. Tesarova for a reflection on what we just heard. Do you think, or maybe you can explain the kind of incentives which the Commission has put forward as part of the Fit for 55 package to try and incentivize homeowners to change their heating systems, and especially for the tenants, because like Masha Smirnova said, there are split incentives. So what has the Commission put in place to try and address this issue?
Okay, thank you very much. So the Energy Efficiency Directive, as we already discussed earlier, prioritizes energy savings for the energy poor, vulnerable social housing. So that's one important element. When it comes to addressing split incentives and the tenant-owner situation, I think the biggest relevance is with the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, which the Commission is still reviewing, and we hope to present a proposal next week. So I cannot comment in detail on what finally the directive will be able to do, but this is a typical issue. You know, what are the, for example, energy certificates demanded for? We have them for selling real estate, but for renting real estate, and what rules we put in place for the energy performance of properties. So I think this is really for the EPBD. Yeah, maybe if I can have a little remark on the previous question, when we spoke about the energy communities, why the Commission didn't address energy communities in the Fit for 55 package. The reason was that the legislation that governs energy communities is very recent, and both in the Renewables Directive and in the Electricity Directive, this legislation entered into effect at the end of last year. So it was not possible for the Commission to review the legislation before we know the effects of it. But we pay a lot of attention to energy communities and to help interested people navigate the rather complex environment for the moment. We are starting with the support from Parliament, actually. We are starting a work on a repository of energy communities across the EU so that we have a better understanding what's going on, where energy communities and under what conditions prosper and what are the barriers for them. So we hope that we would be able to help those interested in this way. Thank you.
Thank Mrs. Treserova. Niels Volsang, maybe a reflection from your side about this issue of split incentives when it comes to either renovation or replacing old heating systems. It's something that's been around for many years already. As far as I can remember, people campaigning for renovation have been flagging this issue. What are your views about this, and how do you think it could be addressed at the European level?
Yes, I think it is indeed a problem, the split incentives of those who own the buildings and those who rent apartments in the buildings, that they don't always have the same interests when it comes to renovations. You know, in Denmark, we've seen actually equity funds taking over apartment buildings and renovating them with the purpose of raising the rent. I think it's called. I think it was referred to as renovictions earlier. And the result was that those who live there cannot live there anymore because the rent is now too high. So some richer people will move into these flats. And that is certainly something we don't want. We don't want either that we have landlords who don't renovate at all because it's expensive for the landlord, and the tenants will save money when it comes to the energy bill, but the landlord doesn't care about that. So I think we need to, how do we deal with that? So that my point is there could be different split incentives in different directions. How do we deal with that? I think it's right that in Article 8 of the new directive proposal that we make sure that the energy saving effort is directed proportionally at the energy poor people, at the vulnerable consumers. And then I think that we could consider making some more hardcore requirements when it comes to the landlords, the owners of the buildings, of social housing buildings, for example, that these buildings needs to be renovated, and the owners of the property has a responsibility here, and it's not just a goal or an ambition. Maybe it should be a hardcore demand, and if we can incorporate that into the directive, I think that's something that I will be looking at when I'm writing my amendments to the directive.
Thanks, Niels Volsang. Let me turn again to Dimitri Vergne now for a question about, it's related to the toolbox, I suppose, that the European Commission presented a few weeks ago to address rising energy prices. The Commission highlighted both short-term and long-term solutions. And in the short term, indeed, there's a consensus that vulnerable households and consumers will need financial support from national governments, essentially. But that, in effect, also actually means subsidizing fossil fuels, because these are people who usually will run, gas boilers or maybe coal or oil boilers. which is obviously contrary to the long-term objective, which is to promote renewables and energy efficiency. So, Dimitri Verne, what are your views on ways potentially of solving this contradiction? Is it something that we just need to live with during the transition?
Well, I think we need to take a very pragmatic approach, right? There are people who need or have oil or gas boilers to heat their homes, and there is no possible way that they will change them in the very near future. So for these people, we need support measures, we need tax reductions, we need maybe ban on disconnections, or lump sum payments, even as some member states already did. But that is, for me, not at all a contradiction with our longer-term goals, which is to move away from fossil-fueled heating systems. And there, I would maybe refer to a study which we published about at the end of November, where we really show that the switch to heat pumps combined with housing retrofit will really make a lot of financial sense for consumers. And we conducted this study, this total cost of ownership study. So looking at the upfront cost of, for instance, buying a heat pump versus a hydrogen boiler, which is seen as a future by the gas industry of boilers. So upfront costs and running costs. And we really, the demonstration is clear. Switching to heat pumps will enable people to make savings. And especially in countries such as Poland and Czechia, where we did the study and where heating costs are more important than in other countries. So we need both short-term measures, short-term protection measures, and the best way to shield consumers in the long term against energy price spikes is to move away from fossil fuels and increase our energy efficiency efforts. So no contradiction for me. Both should go hand in hand.
Thanks, Dimitri Verne. Let me maybe put the question now to Masha Smirnova. Do you believe there is a contradiction between short-term support measures, which are effectively fossil fuel subsidies in effect, and the long-term objective, which is to promote renewables? How do you see that apparent contradiction from your perspective at Eurocities, and how do you believe it could be addressed?
Well, I think we do have to have the long-term view that we need to really phase out fossil fuel subsidies, because still each year across the globe, $500 billion of euros go into subsidizing fossil fuels. But I think in the context of the current recovery, it's very important that we really strengthen also the positive elements that we have seen and that local level is implementing, and these are also measures to lead to more energy independency, more participative models, because we have seen so many local solidarity initiatives, models that are essential for tenants to work together, for example, with the public housing companies. So while it is not a good thing to subsidize consumption of fossil fuels, I think we need to take a pragmatic approach, but we need to really use also the opportunity that the current revision presents to us to accelerate together with the local level and all those models that already exist that shift away from the actually subsidizing fossil fuel consumption and make communities more independent, to make them work together.
Thanks, Mrs. Smirnova. Niels Fulsang, maybe a reflection about this apparent contradiction between short and long-term measures. Do you think this is something that regulators simply need to accept, that there's no way around it?
No, I don't think there is necessarily a contradiction. I think we need to think about the long term right away, and I mean that will also be good for the short term. I think if we accept new investments in fossil fuels or keeping on having subsidy schemes that will hurt us in the long run. And so I think we need to think about how to, in the short run and in the long run, to just get away from the fossil fuels. I belong to a group of thinkers who think that we, having these kind of transitional fuels, going from coal to gas or oil to gas. I mean, why not just go directly from coal to renewable energy, and just, I mean, what is the excuse of not just expanding massively on wind turbines and solar energy and heat pumps and so on? We have a lot of the solutions. I don't think it's a very good argument to say, oh, we need to take one step to gas and then we need to take another step in some years to renewable energy. First of all, we don't have the time to do it. Second, we risk making a very bad investment because we have a lot of stranded assets that we can't use in a few years. So I don't think it will help anybody, not the climate, certainly not the climate, and not the economy either.
Thanks, Neil Fulsang. Masha Smirnova, you just asked the floor. You want to make an additional point?
No, I just wanted to add a point to what Neil said, that there is a big elephant in the room, of course, that stays and that is hotly debated, and this is the issue of the EU taxonomy for sustainable investments, and it's counterproductive to see specific fuels as transitionary fuels, and I completely agree with Niels that we need to shift to renewables. That's actually a much cheaper form of energy now, but also considerably step up public investments. And I think there's a clear risk on the if we make a mistake now, that we really lock in this fossil fuel subsidized unsustainably on a very long term. And this will be a very unfair point, even if it solves some short-term issues, but the future generation will dearly pay for that. And we should really avoid this from happening.
Mrs. Tesarova, maybe final reflection about this discussion about short-term versus long-term and whether there's an apparent contradiction or not. How has the European Commission approached this? Can you maybe expand a bit on that?
Okay, well, thank you. I think the Commission was clear in the toolbox on high energy prices that the direction of travel is let's say, it's the long-term structural measures. It's the Green Deal, which reduces our dependencies on fossil fuels, and which is also a way how to eradicate energy poverty, as discussed this morning. In the short term, and when I say short term, this is very short term, talking this winter. And while we are continuing with the structural measures and we are trying to speed them up as much as possible, it might be inevitable that certain citizens need help. And of course, these are fossil fuel subsidies, and EU is committed to phase them out. But we are talking about a harsh winter. We are talking about, people need to heat their homes. And so in the short term, the Commission encouraged member states to use any additional revenues they have, and they do have them, for example, from the ETS market, to support these citizens. And of course, it is not to keep these citizens dependent on fossil fuels for long term. This is just to help them overcome this emergency situation, and the structural measures, the structural investments, of course, need to be speeded up so that we don't have to do the same next winter. Thank you.
Right, thanks everyone. I think we're reaching now the end of this conference, but before we close, let me ask each one of you to summarize in a few words the main message that you would want our audience to take home with them. What would it be? And let me start with Dimitri Verne, because I understand that you need to leave a little bit early.
Thank you very much, Frédéric. Well, it's a difficult debate to summarize, but I'd say, the takeaway is really let's use the opportunity of all the legislation that we'll have at the moment, the EED, the RED. Adela mentioned the upcoming revision of the EPPD directive to really introduce these structural measures which will tackle the root causes of energy poverty and which will put us on the right path. And I would just pick up on the very important point made by Niels and Masha on investing in the right technology. I fully agree with that. Let's avoid investments in transitional fuels that will only lock people in expensive and carbon-intensive heating system for the foreseeable future. Let's switch as much as possible to electrification, for instance. That might be a bit more costly in terms of upfront cost, but will help us make a lot of savings and reach our climate goals much more quickly in the long run. So we need this long-term approach also on this technology debate. And thanks again for this nice discussion.
Thanks, Dimitri. Let me turn now to Masha Smirnova for your concluding thoughts.
Yes, I think we need to use all possible levers that we have to accelerate this transition, and we need to make sure that the green transition is also progressive of all social groups and takes into consideration the need of vulnerable households. I slightly prefer to talk about vulnerable households than consumers, because looking at some social groups, maybe they are not born consumers, thinking about the high level of child poverty, for example, that we have in Europe, but maybe that's a separate debate, and that is also something that can be discussed in the upcoming co-legislation process. So we think that it will be also extremely important that all obligations on member states are not watered down in the revisions, and at the contrary, that reinforced. I think in the scope of what we're discussing today, it will be also very much worth looking, and member states should be invited to look very closely to the Council recommendation, forthcoming Council of addressing the social and employment impacts of the green transition, because there will be also a set of measures from EU, national, and local levels that can be collectively reinforced.
Thanks, Masha. Niels Fulsang, you need to leave early as well, so maybe we can have your concluding thoughts. Or maybe, actually, Niels has already left. So let me ask Baiba Miltovica for your concluding words. Baiba, I think you're muted, so we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes.
I have this habit
now we
to
can hear
mute
you.
and unmute. Yes, thank you. So thank you for giving this for the conclusion, the last sentences. And we need to really look at what kind of instruments are already in our hands that we can use, and use it in more effective way to elevate energy poverty by facilitating access to renewable energy and also renewable energy appliances that are in many cases needed for the energy poor citizens. Furthermore, we need to look at how public authorities can steer building renovation schemes more effectively, because as I mentioned, and also we heard from other speakers, schemes so far doesn't work if you talk about renovation wave or renovation rates in residential sector. I'm not talking about public, I'm talking about a residential sector. We need to think how we can better decarbonize the heating and cooling systems in our societies, and also think about vulnerable households at local level. And think about coordinated actions and coordinated one energy poverty, but wider definition. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And so to conclude, now let me pass the floor to Mrs. Adela Tesarova.
Thank you, Frederic, and thanks to everyone for very useful remarks. Nothing major to add from my side. I would just maybe say that let's use this opportunity when energy poverty is finally a priority, and let's deploy all the tools we have in the energy policy to eradicate it. You know, we cannot resolve the underlying social issues with energy policy, but we can actually address energy poverty at the core, and we can get rid of it once and forever. So let's do it, and let's use this opportunity we have now when everybody talks about it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adela Tisarova. I think this wraps up today's event. A big thanks to PKE for supporting it. Thanks to our speakers, of course, for the time that you took to be with us today, and to our audience for following us. If you've missed the beginning of this debate, you can watch it again on social media and YouTube. And if you would like to know more about upcoming events at Euractiv, just check our website, events.euractiv.com, for more. We hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.